My talk is titled, God's Got This. And that dropped down weeks ago. And I didn't know where I was going to be talking at the time. It dropped down about the time that I was at Unity of the Rockies in Colorado Springs speaking. And I already had a topic, and then God's Got This dropped down. So I thought, okay, we'll just hold on to that and see what happens. The rest of that title is Balancing the Light and the Dark of Life. The magic of the dark. The magic of the dark. What I know from having spent 22 years at Mile High Church and having just retired, I was teaching middle school and teens, and what I know is that they would remember stories. And perhaps you're the same. I could talk to them for 10 minutes about a concept and they wouldn't get it. But if I told them a story, they remembered those stories for years and would remind me of them. So that's what I'm going to start with today, a teaching story. And I know that Jesus knew that. And consequently, we have the parables. And I taught those parables to those middle school kids, and they remember the story. So here we go, a personal story from my life to help with this title of God's Got This. It was September of 1991. My children were having visitation with their father, and my husband at the time, and those of you that know me, if you know me, you know why I say it that way. My husband at the time and I had a romantic afternoon on a Sunday. We were having a romantic sexual event. And what I would say is at the peak of my orgasm, I lost consciousness. I can only imagine what my husband must have thought. I don't know how many seconds I was out. I have no concept of that, and I don't know how it affected him. But when I came to, I couldn't speak clearly. I couldn't see clearly. I found out I couldn't walk. And as I came back to reality, all I could hear was music, because Carlos Nakai, there was flute music on, and Carlos Nakai was playing the flute. And what was in my mind at the time was, turn it off, or I'm going to die. Turn it off, turn it off. My husband sat me up. He didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong. Somehow he got me to the bathroom because it appeared that I was going to be sick, which goes with trauma like that. I couldn't talk, so I couldn't say anything, okay? His first thought, I guess, was get her to the hospital. So he got me dressed. He got me to his pickup truck. Now, this is in West Texas. That explains the pickup. It's a small town, West Texas hospital. I got to the emergency room. The doctor looked at me, he examined me, and he said, well, the flu's going around. Oh, geez. And I think, she probably has the flu. So I'm going to give her a shot of morphine. Think about it. Give her a shot of morphine and you can take her back home. So that's what my husband did, because we trust our doctors, right? So probably 2 a.m., 3 a.m., according to what he told me later, he took me back to the hospital. The doctor said, well, I still think it's the flu, but, if you're insisting, I'll put her in the hospital and we'll observe. So I was in that hospital, that small town, West Texas hospital, for 2 days on morphine. My husband came in then, and he said to me, I don't feel right about this. Something's wrong. I'm taking you out of here. So he told the nurse, disconnect her from everything. I am taking her out of here. And the nurse said, you can't do that. He said, I damn sure can. So again, he put me in his pickup truck and we drove 80 miles to Lubbock, Texas, the big city. Okay. We got to that hospital and the man on duty there, that doctor, it wasn't but seconds. And he said, well, I think it's a brain aneurysm. We're going to run tests and see what to do. So that's what happened. A week after that initial happening on a Sunday, that next Sunday I had brain surgery. And, you know, it was big news in that little West Texas town. Everybody was talking about it. Oh, it's so sad. What has happened to Nadine? Oh, my God. You know, that was the biggest thing because there's not much to talk about in a small West Texas town. So I had the brain surgery and my husband brought me home to heal. He started thinking about it, I'm sure. And, you know, I was a teacher then. I was a public school art teacher. But I also, on weekends, we would go to different locations and I would show my work as an artist and sell my work. And so he knew that in January, this aneurysm happened in September, but he knew in January I was coming to Denver for an art show, Colorado Indian Market. And so he began to talk to me about recovery. He began to say, you know, if you could go back to teaching by maybe December, then you could go to the art show. So he felt like that would get me working on it, right? Which is exactly what happened. I went back to teaching in December after having brain surgery. I was on pain meds, of course. And I moved through that year to May. And when I got to May, I went to the school superintendent and I said, I need a leave of absence for about a year so that I can totally get well. The superintendent in that West Texas town said, we don't have a policy for that. We don't have a policy. So I went home with no job. So you look at the losses. You look at the losses that are accumulating, okay? So I went back home with no job. In 1995, a few years after that, we went to the art show in Denver in January because I did it every January, and I didn't feel well. One of the customers brought me a box. My husband and I brought us a box of pastries, and I just enjoyed the heck out of that. By the time I got home, I felt like I had the flu. I was ill. I went to bed. I laid there for a long time. I couldn't eat anything. I was drinking Sprite, because I thought, well, if you're sick, you drink Sprite, right? My husband then, because I looked so bad, he took me back to the emergency room in the small town hospital with a different doctor, praise God. And that doctor tested me and said, you have diabetes and you were close to death. If he had not brought you in, you probably would have died right there in your house. So I was in the hospital a week, and now I have type 1 diabetes where I have to take injections. This human life is full of interesting experiences. Okay, so I was put on antidepressants also. Yeah, another detail. And then after being around me for a while, my husband came to me one morning before I even woke up, because he got up early for work, and he came and he woke me up and he said, I have to leave. And I was like, what? I have to leave. I can't do this anymore. And, you know, I'm falling to the floor like, what? And he walked out the front door and didn't come back. So consequently, I have no job. I have no health. I have no husband who I relied on 100%. So what do you do? What do you do in the dark time? Where do you turn? There was nobody bringing casseroles anymore. There was nobody really checking in on me because enough time had passed. So every night I would walk outside with my little dog and look at the sky. And living in West Texas, the sky was immense, horizon to horizon. We didn't have trees. So I looked at the sky and I started talking to the sky. And what I said was, what do I do now? So in effect, that was turning to God. Now I grew up as a Methodist, and I was not always faithful to the church every Sunday. There was one Sunday where I saw a broadcast from Colorado from from Mr. Vogt, Reverend Vogt. He had a broadcast on TV, and I just happened to see it as I was getting ready to go to my church. And I called my husband in, that husband, and I said, this is the church I want to go to. So I turned to God, and every night when I would go out with my little dog, I'd say, what do I do now, God? What do I do now? What do I do now? And what that means is I surrendered to something bigger than I am, more powerful than I am, because I believed in God, and I didn't know what else to do. What do I do now, God? So guess what happened? It wasn't very long before I got a phone call from a customer in Colorado. And that customer, Lori is her name, she had bought a drawing from me. And she called and she said, well, are you coming to the art show? Are you coming to the art show? And I was like, no, I can't this year. I said, I don't have the money. My husband, and she knew him, my husband is gone. I don't have the money to pay for the booth fee. It costs $500 for a piece of concrete floor. Yeah, $1,000 for a double booth space. I didn't have it. So she said, just a minute. So she walked away from the phone. When she came back, she said, we're going to send you the booth fee. Okay? They sent the money. So I got my oldest daughter. We got in the Suburban and with all my stuff, and we came to Colorado. Now, the interesting thing about that is that I had a drawing in that booth, and I'm moving away from the camera here. This drawing that is here, I'll just hold it for you all. This drawing is a drawing that pulled a man into my booth. When he saw this drawing, holding it up here, but it's hard to see. In this is a drawing that I did from a variety of photographs, and it's about the Vietnam Wall. And it has veterans here in the picture, but down here on this side, right here, there's a group of West Point cadets. And the name of this drawing is All Our Fine Young Men. So this man walks into my booth. He walks up to that drawing and he said, why is this drawing at Colorado Indian Market? And I said, well, there's a Native American man in the picture. That qualifies. He said, well, I used to be that. So I turned to him and I'm like, oh, really? He said, yeah. He said, I graduated from West Point. And I had told him about this drawing. I said, I did this drawing for my ex-husband. He heard the ex part and he said, well, would you like to go to dinner? His wife had died the previous fall. And I said, no, I would not. I don't know who you are. You can put your name in my book, you know. So he wrote his name and address, and he wrote, call me. So I just let that go. And the next day, I was wandering around before the show opened. I was looking at other people's art. And my daughter comes running up to me and she says, Mom, he's here. He's back. And I went, who? And she goes, you know that man that asked you to dinner? He's here. So he found me. He's in a suit with a tie. It's a Sunday. And he goes, well, you know, if I flew my little airplane to Denver City, Texas, that small town, would you go to dinner with me there? And I said, sure. In a small town, everybody knows everybody, and you could not get away with anything, right? So he flew down there 6 times, and then he said, I think you should move to Colorado. You should move to Colorado with me. I've got a big house. I'm all by myself. I've got a car you can have. Well, okay. Well, should I make that decision when I don't know him very well? And plus my youngest daughter said, I ain't going with you. She was a freshman in high school. She was a twirler in the band. She had a boyfriend. She said, I'm not going. So this was angst. What do I do? Intuitively, and I mean intuitively, I said, I'm going to Colorado. And I told her, because she said, I'm going to live with my dad. I said, okay, live with your dad. But if you feel threatened in any way, because this man could be angry and abusive. And so I said, you call me immediately, I'll come get you. So that's what happened. I moved to Colorado, and guess what? My future husband's house is 5 minutes away from Mile High Church. And one of his friends said, you know, they're having a special event on a Friday at Mile High Church. Larry Gatlin is going to be there. And of course, Larry Gatlin's from West Texas. So I went, yeah, let's go. So we went to that concert, and on the platform, accompanying Larry Gatlin, was Roger Teal playing his banjo. And I said, if that minister that's playing a banjo would do that with Larry Gatlin, I am coming to this church. And I came every Sunday. I took every class. I became a practitioner. I ended up going to ministerial school, and boom, here I am. All right? Maybe that husband should have stayed with me. That's how I feel about that. But the story, if you look at that, what do I do now, God? I surrendered. I opened to receive. And look what happened. I could not have written that as a story. All of those things that came to me that were good, I still think back on that story in amazement. How did all that happen like that? That man walked in on my booth because of this picture? Really? And I ended up marrying him. We've been together 24 years. What? It's fascinating. So what I know is the most important thing you can do is to turn to God in a dark time. So I want to read this quote for you. This is from Max Lucado, and it says, after we've endured something, instead of asking God why, let's ask what? What do I need to learn? Nobody gets through life pain-free. Isn't that comforting? Nobody gets through life pain-free. But how we respond to pain is essential. If we focus on all we've lost, which I could have done, I could have wallowed in my misery. I could have made that choice. If we focus on all we've lost, we'll be thrown into a cycle of negativity. If we manage our pain right, we'll emerge battle-tested and better on the other side. So here's what I know happened that I also believe helps us get through dark times. And when I say dark times, I'm talking about our personal journey within, but I'm also talking about the world we're living in. I'm talking about the country we're living in. I am very involved right now in social justice because there's a lot of issues that are up right now. So how do we maneuver through these days when we could get really depressed? We could get angry. How do we maneuver? Number one, and this all started because of Science of Mind 1. Those of you, the practitioners in here, you know what I'm talking about. You have to get honest. No more making up stories to make yourself look good. And that, you know, as human beings, that's what we do. And I really have worked a lot with my daughters with that. It's like, is this true? My daughter Savannah is now a Science of Mind minister in Seattle. That young one. Yeah. So she'll tell me something. She'll call me and talk about something, some guy she's dating or whatever. And I'm like, are you making up a story? Because she is so good at making up stories. Yeah, well, maybe I am. So you have to get honest. You have to tell the truth. So this is from Brene Brown. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. We have to explore the darkness. That could be going back to birth. That could be, of course, all those childhood things that happen. And everybody's got stuff, right? The next thing you need to do is take self-responsibility. That's big. And what I know about that husband that left me, I put all my attention on him. I gave my soul to him. And that was not enough. And when he left, then I was like, powerless. What do I do? What do I do? So that took bravery, and it was about me taking self-responsibility. You have to think about your own life. You have to think about your decisions. You have to stop blaming other people. Look at the people I could blame in that story. I could have blamed that school superintendent. I could have been angry with him for a very long time because he didn't seem to care about me. I could be really angry with that ex-husband, right? That I gave my soul to. Yeah. So the next thing you have to pay attention to is you have to practice forgiveness. And that church I spoke at Unity of the Rockies, my talk was on forgiveness. And I've worked with it for a long, long time. Because that husband that I'm married to now for almost 24 years, he's Richard the Fourth. Let that sink in. He thinks it's funny because he's husband number 4. And when he says I'm Richard the Fourth, it makes him feel royal, right? Right? And I finally had to say, you know, pick and choose who you say that to. Yeah. So anyway, I had husbands to forgive. I had 2 abusive ex-husbands. You know, I had a lot of work to do. And of course, people always say, well, I don't know how to do that. How do you forgive? My method was I just sat down in the quiet and I closed my eyes and I pictured that person and I surrounded them in light. That's all I did. I surrounded them in light. I did it, and in some cases it took years. But how did I know that it worked? Because one ex-husband, who was the abusive father of my children, he called me up and had a conversation about the children. Once I was living in Colorado, we talked about the kids. He didn't cuss me out. He was kind. And I was like, it works. It actually works. So we have to practice forgiveness. Above all else, it may be the most important thing of all. And that's it. Number one and always is turn to God. Number one and always through all things, turn to God. Number two, get honest. Number three, take self-responsibility. Number four, practice forgiveness. You do those things, it's kind of like the 4 agreements, right? My version. And I would like to close with a quotation. I got this quotation from what you sent out to me, Alice. And this is from Howard Thurman. And I thought it was just perfect for right now. In the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whisper of the heart giving strength to weakness, courage to fear, hope to despair. I'm going to repeat that first part. In the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whisper of the heart. Yes? There's your power. There's your power. Anytime you're feeling powerless, you remember who you are. You remember that you were divinely connected to all that is. Yes? And I call that good. Amen. And to do that, I always ask that you just breathe that in for a second. Breathe it in. So I just give thanks. I give great thanks for these words, for this message that comes from the divine. It is good to reflect. It is good to just think about these things. It is good to work these things. It is good to pay attention. It is good to be aware, to move into that place where you can trust that the divine has got it. God's got this. God's got this. And what I know about that God is always giving. That God is always for, never against. That God is love. Something I learned as a small child. God is love. Yes, we take that in. We're open to receive this, all of these ideas, receive them and actually do the work for ourselves. And as far as forgiveness goes, we have many we can forgive, but what's most important is we forgive ourselves for the choices we made that maybe were interesting. So just forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. I call this time together good. I call this community good. And I am grateful. I am grateful for all that is today and all that is unfolding. Just knowing we're safe because God's got this and all is well. And so it is.
Say to yourself, I am continuously receiving new impressions, new, better, and fuller ways for living. I let the newness, freshness, and originality of spirit permeate my entire consciousness. I enter into the limitless variations of self-expression, which I know the divine spirit is projecting into my experience. Knowing that all experience is a play of life upon itself, the blossoming of love into self-expression, the coming forth of good into the joy of its own being, I enter into the game of living with joyful anticipation, with enthusiasm. I play the game of life. I play it well, and I enjoy it. Today I enter into my divine inheritance, shaking my thought clear from the belief that external conditions are imposed upon me. I know that there is nothing that hinders the Spirit from manifesting itself through me in joy, in happiness, and in peace. It is the law of my life that wherever I go, I shall meet with joy, with love, with friendship, gratitude, and compensation, with a complete opportunity for the expression of every talent and every ability I possess. Today, the doorway of opportunity is opened wide before me.